Hello, everyone. We are in Alpharetta, Georgia today, and we have the distinct honor of spending some time with industry veteran Cecil Bentley. I can say with all sincerity that Cecil has been the most influential person to me in my concrete career. The same painful project that led to my friendship with Chris Britton of Brassfield Gorey over 20 years ago also led me to my friendship with Cecil. You may recall hearing about it in my podcast last summer with Chris. It was a project in which just about everything that could go wrong did go wrong, from a faulty specification, air and train concrete for an interior hard troweled slab, to malfunctioning admix equipment, to lack of attention to detail to the fresh concrete field tests during the time of placement, and on and on and on. The intense pain of the experience caused me to ask the question, who can come and teach me and my team at Fulton Concrete about proper placement practices of commercial concrete? And the answer that I heard was, call Cecil Bentley. And so I did. Cecil came and spent a day with my team and several Brassfield project managers teaching us through the ACI Flat Work Finisher certification class. I learned about concrete as Cecil told one war story after another, and I was like a sponge. I'm proud to say that I missed only one question on the exam, and that had far more to do with Cecil's teaching than my intellect. One of the Brassfield guys told me afterwards, if only we had had this class before that project. Cecil, it's good to be with you today, my friend. Please dive in and tell us your story. Tell us about yourself, where you grew up, the usual stuff.
I was born in Anniston, Alabama.
Yes.
1941. It makes me age 84. My dad was a concrete finisher. We called Marietta, Georgia, our home. Because my dad was in construction, we moved about a lot in the Southeast, which meant that from year to year, I'd end up in a different state, in a different school.
No kidding.
Yes. Finally returning back to Marietta, and I graduated from Sprayberry High School.
Yes.
From there, I joined the Army in 1959 after graduation, and went to Japan and spent over 20 months in Japan. And during that period, my father and my two brothers, they formed Bentley and Sons Concrete Flooring Company.
Concrete flooring.
Yes.
Company.
Okay. And little did I know at the time, but they had my name on all the paperwork. So I was a part of the company and didn't even realize it. And when I returned from overseas back home in July of '62, I immediately went to work the next morning up at Thrift City at the intersection of Carr Parkway and Roswell Road across from the Big Chicken.
Yes.
That was a Saturday morning, and I was up there rubbing curb and gutter. And from there is where it began.
Now, let me ask you a quick question. Were you married at that time?
Yes.
So did you get married before you went to Japan or after? Or during?
Just before.
Okay.
And so she joined me in Japan, and then she returned home. And that evening when I got off the Greyhound bus, my dad wanted me to come on up there and go to work. It was on Friday evening. And I had not seen my wife in about 90 days. And my mother said, well, don't you think maybe he could wait till tomorrow? And so begrudgingly, my dad said, okay, but in the morning, he'll need to be up here. So I went to work.
Let me ask you a question for my clarity. Why was it, I guess the term floor is throwing me. That was the terminology back then?
Good question.
Yeah.
Because my brother Bob, who was the office manager, his original intent was that we would do the concrete work because of my dad, but he actually wanted to get into resilient floor covering and carpet. He wanted to become a flooring company.
Okay.
And of course, that never come about. But that was where the Southern Floor Co. came in. And so from Southern Floor Co., as I say, we did pretty well in this market. And part of the problem with working in the Atlanta market is that you've got 75 and you've got all these interstates that converge and go through Atlanta. And you'd have all these people coming from up north and across the country, and they would come to Atlanta and they'd see all these tower cranes and they'd see all this work and activity going on. And the next thing you know, there'd be another concrete contractor in your territory. But as I say, we did well in our market here. And then in about 63, my two brothers decided that they wanted to go out and to venture out and do their own thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so at about that same time, one of my uncles came into the company, and then another uncle come into the company. And we were still Southern Floor Co. And one of the uncles left pretty early, and that left the three of us, so hence become Tri-Bentley Constructors, Inc.,
Okay.
which was my dad, my uncle, and me.
Got it.
And they basically told me that, we can do the work, but we don't do the office work, and you'll need to take care of all that. And so that's how we come about. And after that, my other uncle that was part of Tri-Bentley, he retired, my dad retired, and that come about around probably 1970 maybe, in that area. And then become sole owner of Tri-Bentley.
But you kept the name, Tri-Bentley.
Kept the name. And that pretty much is the history of how I come about coming into the industry.
Now, when did you and your wife, start having children?
1960. We had our first son, and then we had two other sons after that. Lee Bentley.
Yes, I know Lee. I've met Lee.
Lee Bentley. He actually, my oldest son, he actually worked in Tri-Bentley Constructors, Inc., and he ran our concrete pumps. And after we shut down in 95, he stayed in the industry in the pumping business and then with one of the material suppliers, and he's now with another pump company. So he'll retire in the pump company.
So he's been in pumping a long time.
He is quite an expert in concrete pumping, and very few people he does not know.
Right. Cecil, and as everybody knows, I get into these and questions come to mind along the way. And one of them is, when did the concrete pump make its debut in Atlanta? A real practical pump, one that became kind of the...
The individual that pioneered concrete pumping in Atlanta, Georgia, was a man by the name of Phil Jory. Phil Jory,
okay.
Jory.
Yes.
And he pioneered concrete pumping. And he had these, what we challenged, squeeze creeks at the time, where the concrete was squeezed through a tube, and it would absolutely drive you crazy. It was so slow, and there was always this argument between the mixed designs. Well, I can't pump it because of the mixed design, and the mixed design guy that ready mix producer, he said, well, he can't pump it because his equipment's not working right. And so it's a combination of both of those. But Phil Jory was a true salesperson and a very nice man, but his equipment was left a little bit to be desired. And then there was a concrete contractor, a man by the name of Jim Jarrett.
Okay.
Yeah, and he was of about the same age as my dad. And he had he had Whiteman pumps. The same company, I think, that make the trolley machines had pumps. And it had a twin engine, had two engines. And so it wasn't it was a trailer pump. Didn't have the other pumps at the time and the booms.
Right.
And so Jim Jarrett had that, and he did well with it. And Phil did okay with it. But we obviously couldn't work with Jim because he was a competitor, and we couldn't figure this thing out of whose fault it is. Is it the rhythmic producer or is it Jim because Phil Jory because we can't get our concrete pump? So we ended up buying our own pumps and starting our own pump business.
About what year was that, you think?
That would have been around in the early 70s. The first pump that we had was a Reinert, Jerry Reinert pump company, and it was just a huge regular pump, and we actually used that, and we would pump our high rises up the side of the building with pipe instead of the tower pumps that they have now, the booms that they have, and we started pumping our own business. And at that time, my son came into the company and as a pump operator, and you had to have more than one pump. So we ended up with about 5 pumps, I think, at the most that we had. And so Lee ran the pumps, and he's still in that business today.
So the work of Tri-Bentley, when you were the sole, at the point where you were the sole owner, what all did you do? What was the what I mean, the scope of your concrete?
Well, in the
work?
beginning, we actually did a lot of residential, and then we got into some commercial, gas stations and small business, commercial business, and then we got into a little bit larger, maybe small warehouses. At the time, you got to remember that the average size of a concrete placement was like 8,000, 10,000, 15,000 was a large placement. So we just kind of grew, and it became pretty clear that the competition got more plentiful, and it got a little bit pretty competitive, that general contractors would pretty much give you all of the risk that you would assume.
Accept, yes.
So in the beginning, the general contractors, they would do all the setup, and we would just come in and place and finish. And so to try to get ahead of our competition, we started doing setup. Started doing fine grade, set and edge forms, put it in wire mesh, and we started doing that, and so that kind of gave us a edge. And then as time went on, our competition started doing that, and so we started looking into foundations, and so we started doing foundations and along with our flat work, and from there it just grew into a complete concrete contractor.
So the poured wall, when would you say that Atlanta became a poured wall market? You know what I'm saying? In other words, it was at the mid 80s. Is that when the poured wall foundation became so common?
Well, it's a good point because as far as the residential market
Right.
goes, I would say probably if you were to think back around 50 years ago, maybe around 2000, maybe. No, I'm sorry. Around maybe in the 70s, most of your residential, a lot of it was basically block.
Right.
And so the transition to poured walls, I would think, probably started around late 70s or 80s,
Yes.
maybe.
Yes.
And that's when your poured wall contractors started coming in. Obviously, in the commercial end of it, because of the engineering and structural necessities, you have your reinforced concrete walls.
So in Tri-Bentley, what was, as you look back, one of the largest projects that you took on? Does anything come to mind? And what was this? What was it?
Well, I'll say that in 1964, I think it is, when Six Flags Over Georgia
Oh, yes.
came about. We were doing, high-rise buildings. We were doing 24-story buildings and large warehouses. But again, back in that time, I mean, today you have warehouses that are 1 million to 4 million square feet.
Yeah.
Back in the day, um, 100,000 square foot warehouse was a big warehouse. So we were doing that size commercial work, but then we got involved with Six Flags Over Georgia. So that's probably the largest job in terms of magnitude, money-wise,
Right.
as well as how long it took us to do the job. Six Flags Over Georgia,
Sure.
and then from there we've done jobs that were $2-3 million and that or something like that. We were a large concrete contractor. At one time, we were, I'd say, the largest in the area. But today, you have concrete contractors out there that really are doing a tremendous amount of work.
Yeah.
Large volumes.
So what?
Multi-millions.
So what? After you Tri-Bentley ended, what did you do then?
Well, I stayed active in the industry. I started doing work with Lockwood Green Engineers, going out and looking at projects, doing pre-slab construction meetings, on-site observations. I did some work involved in disputes, and just being active in the industry.
And does that include your involvement with ACI? When did that begin?
That came about pretty quick. Probably around 96 or something like that, 97. I've always been interested in issues facing concrete contractors. If you think about when I first started out, the way that it went as far as the concrete contractor placing finishing, the way that it went was that they would have a pre-construction meeting, not a pre-slab construction meeting, but a construction meeting, which meant that we would go to the meeting and they would talk about all of the disciplines. I mean, the mechanical, the electrical, the grading, drywall, painting, everything in this one construction meeting. And so you would sit there for hours on end
Wow.
And then at the end of the day, at the end of the meeting, they would turn around and they would look at you and they would say, oh, and by the way, the electrician's going to be out of this area Friday. We want you to be here Monday and pour Tuesday.
Wow.
And that would be the extent. That would be the input. Um, and one thing that kind of started um, ringing home to me was that, okay, well, really, we don't know anything. They know it all. And at that time, you got to remember that they actually had blueprints.
Yes.
And that
Yes.
the superintendents actually knew a lot about concrete placement and finishing. It's not like they didn't know. They did know a lot. And so they just kind of discounted maybe asking you anything. They just, you know what you're supposed to do, just do it. And so it got to the point of where we didn't know anything, at least we couldn't contribute unless there was a problem. If there was an issue, then they would bring us in and they would say, well, you should know better, or you should have told us because you're the finishers. You should have told us.
Yeah.
And of course, that's really not the way that it works in the real world. However, when I went out of business, when I closed down, I wanted to pursue these pre-slab construction meetings.
Right.
I actually wanted to have meetings with everybody in attendance so that we could go through all of the scope of work, everybody's responsibilities, and everybody participate in that meeting, because it was always important to me to know that at the meeting, the owner, the architect, the engineer was present, and these people could modify their drawings. They could modify the contracts by the stroke of a pen.
Yes.
For what come out of that meeting. And so that was my goal. And so I started doing that. And as I say, I worked with Jerry Holland and Wayne Walker, formerly with Lockwood Green and now with SSI. And they had a relationship with Home Depot, Walmart, other clients. And so I just traveled about the country doing workshops, doing observations, troubleshooting, and doing the pre-slab construction meetings.
So let me ask this question, if I can formulate it in my head. Over those years, as you got into that role, which you sound like, I mean, you just gravitated to, it was something that you really enjoyed. What would you say were some of the biggest errors, for the lack of a better word, on some of those big industrial slabs that you were getting involved in? What seemed to be, was there a particular problem that seemed to emerge more than others, or just a variety, or jointing, or what would you say as you look back on that?
I would say the biggest thing is either not fully understanding the specifications and details and the attention to details, and at the same time not asking questions when they should have been asking questions. Right. And assuming.
Right.
And sometimes it would actually be where, because of a finisher's experience, and he would know that what was on the drawings would be incorrect. For example, it needs a saw cut here and they don't have one there. So I'm going to take it upon myself and I'm going to put a saw cut there because I know it needs it. And so what he doesn't realize, that when he does that, he may have eliminated a potential crack, unwanted crack, but now he's caused something on the other end that did crack, and now he's taken the responsibility of the designer off of their shoulder and put it on his shoulder, because he's modified the plans, the drawings, the specifications. And so not using what I consider to be one of the best tools that a concrete contractor can have is a request for information, an RFI. If they would just simply use an RFI, that is the greatest tool they have, rather than just assuming that they can do this or do that without getting direction. I know that's not right, so I'm just going to do it this way. And again, short pencil, better than long memory.
Yes.
You know, you can have lunch with somebody, you can be friends with somebody, but at the end of the day, if he is working for your client, he's a project manager, at the end of the day, if there's an issue, survival is what he's going to go for. Well, I'm sorry, I don't remember that I said that. So if you don't have it in writing, it really doesn't exist.
Yes.
And like an old attorney told me one time, if you go to court, he who has the most documentation is most likely to win.
That was one of the key takeaways from your class, Cecil. I've never forgot short pencil, better than long memory. And it really it seems like a trivial thing. It's not a trivial thing. It was the documentation, and it's not a matter of necessarily trust or distrust. It's just the fact that people forget, and you save everybody, not just yourself.
A good example is that I had a superintendent, finest superintendent. There's no better superintendent. He goes into the contractor's trailer to ask the superintendent a question about a detail on the drawings. He's building a set of monumental stairs. He thinks he understands it, but he's not sure, and he wants to get clarification. Who best to go to but the superintendent? The superintendent was in a discussion with another trade, and it was, back and forth, pretty heavy. And so when my superintendent goes in, the contractor superintendent said, "Yep, Claude, what do you need?" And he said, "Here, I don't quite understand this detail, but this is what I think. What do you think?" He has so much respect for my superintendent. He said, "Yeah, I think you're right." So as it turns out, he was wrong. And I happened to go out there, and I'm looking at the stairs, and I say, this is not right. Well, sure it's right, because so-and-so said it was. I go in there and ask him about it. He has no recollection of it. So anyway, that's what I see as a lot of the problem. Then there's some ambiguities about responsibility and details and all sorts of things.
So what would you say, you've been at this for many, many years, what do you enjoy about our industry, concrete construction, ready mix? What's enjoyable to you?
What is there not to enjoy? Just think about it. You can go out there and you can produce something, and 15 years later, you can go by there and there it is. And you can look at it and you can think of the day that you was there when you was placing concrete. It's fresh to you. The people that you meet, some of the finest people that you'll ever meet.
Yes.
I mean, and they're builders. Look at what they build. Just everything. The whole industry.
I'm with you. I totally agree with you.
The thing, too, that you have to think about, and my uncle told me this, that because when you think about who is in the industry, we're not talking about just, finishers and engineers. We're talking about laborers. We're talking about everyone. Because my uncle used to tell me that if you want to know how to do something right, you go watch the person that's doing it every day for a living.
Yeah.
So if you want to know how to drive a stake in the ground, go watch a laborer that drives a stake for a living. So it's every day you're learning something new from somebody. You have to be a lifetime learner.
Well said. What I'm always interested to hear from the different perspectives over the span of your work. What would you say some of the really significant changes to the trade, to concrete construction? We talked a little bit about pumping and such, but things like, things that really changed the game, so to speak. Anything come to mind as you look back from when you began that was a game changer, for the lack of a better word?
Well, if you just look at concrete itself, look at how sophisticated the admixtures are. Back in the day, we had lignin-based admixtures from the timber industry.
Yes.
And depending on the species, the time of the year they harvest it, and the bleed water was incredible. I mean, it would just look like a stream of water over it, and it would just bleed and bleed and bleed. And then as a finisher, you've got to figure out, how am I going to finish this concrete? And you've got to remove that water, and it just bleeds. And it was a water reducer. It was had to do with set control, and so it was so variable. Your experience,
right.
Not good. So admixtures.
So you're saying that from in your experience, it was the admixtures removed or dampened some of that variability that was so challenging.
Oh, absolutely,
no doubt.
I mean, it's incredible. The admixture today, however, and it still happens, not on a regular basis, but once in a while you'll get some incompatibility, and it's a disaster. So these things are going to happen, and I'm not sure how you can avoid that when it's like a one-off event or something.
Right.
But so admixtures, the graded aggregate mix that we have now, it used to be the production mix was a 57 mix.
Yes.
Give me a 57 mix with air or without air, and that was the production mix. So there wasn't a lot of 5.5 bag, 6 bag mix. Wasn't a lot of prescription concrete like it is today. I mean, they can dial it in to the T. The equipment, I mean, when they come up with the laser screed, and you can imagine, and then the riders, they came up with the double trowel, triple trowel, the saws. I mean, just when you go to a early entry saw where you have a dry blade as opposed to a wet saw with a huge machine to run it, and that you have a window of opportunity to saw cut that slab, you may have to be out there at 2 o'clock in the morning so that you can get your timing right and cut the slab to promote cracking where you want it to crack, hopefully. And so there's just so much about the industry.
It's changed a lot.
Yes.
To put it.
And it's still evolving.
And still evolving. Change gears a little bit to a question that I'm always interested in, and that is, as you look back over your life, who were some of the most influential people that, let's face it, you interact with a lot of people over the course of your career, and everybody at some level, as you've said, even it could be a laborer that you learn something from. But in terms of a really significant influence in how you conducted yourself, how you did business, who comes to mind, and what way did they influence you?
Well, and there's a long list, but I have to start with my dad, because my dad, when you work with him, there was no amount of work that he couldn't do. I mean, he could do it all, and never complained, and he expected you to work and do all that you could do. But he was just good to work with. My uncle, even both my brothers, both of them in different ways. One of them was a finisher, one was an office guy. And so I learned from both of them. But every employee for Tri-Bentley, part of my goal was, and you can appreciate it because you know me, but is I strive to hire somebody that knows more than I know.
Yes.
Because if you only know what I know, then you're not a lot of help to me. So there are people like Gene Graves that graduated from Southern Tech, local guy, and he was just as honest and good family man, and he was one of the best field engineers that I've ever worked with in my life. And he taught me a lot about layout and engineering and just in general. And so, but every employee, my superintendent, Claude Miller, he just one of the finest superintendents. Just, I could go on and on. Angelo Colasani from Detroit. We had our first super flat, and so we had come up with our own methodology, and I was concerned about it. And Angelo and I had talked, even though he was in Detroit and he was a major nationwide contractor.
Right.
But we had become friends through a local project that we had competed against, and we got it and he didn't. But we kind of made friends there. And he invited me up to Detroit, and I went up one night and spent the evening with him going through our methodology, and he opened up about critiquing it and what they do. And that's just rare that would ever happen. And so Angelo, there was just Jerry Holland, Wayne Walker,
right,
with Lockwood Green, Larry Patrick, Lockwood Green. I just learned so much from those guys about the engineering side of it.
Yes.
And so,
well, you hit on it earlier. You noted the idea that you're a lifelong learner, and because of that, everybody that comes along that has something to teach, you're ready to listen and learn. Let me ask you a question, a point of clarification for the listeners. Some may understand, some may not. So explain what you meant. You said earlier, super flat. What does that mean? When did that become a specification? Talk just a little bit about that idea, that requirement.
Well, I want to think maybe around 76 or something like that. I had an opportunity a couple of years. I'd been hearing about super flat and the equipment they use to measure the flatness of your slab within a thousandth of an inch. And you think about it, prior to that, an eighth of an inch and 10 feet, that was standard for the industry. And little did you know, but if you actually can execute and install a slab to an eighth of an inch and 10 feet, you have successfully installed a very flat floor.
Wow.
But of course, with the equipment that we were using at the time, rarely was we able to achieve that. But the thing was, they didn't really have the equipment to measure it. It was,
Yes.
under 10-foot straight edge. But so I had an opportunity to meet Alan Face, and love that old man. He had a project down in Covington, and it was a super flat, and we had the opportunity to do that slab. And so I attended a pre-slab construction meeting, and he went through in detail how to achieve this floor flatness requirement, and had a lot of conversation with him. We actually ended up not doing the job, but it had nothing to do with um, it was some contract issue that we couldn't resolve with the contract, so we didn't do the job. But we actually ended up doing one, and we did it at DuPont. And at that time, we installed the first or second flattest floor that's ever been measured in the world.
No kidding.
And I can say
Wow.
that because I'm not bragging for me, Cecil Bentley, my guys that installed that slab.
Where was that, Cecil?
It's right here,
in Atlanta?
85. And we had FF number averaging 140, and FL's averaging 110. And there was and we had a write-up in Engineer News Record, so I was very proud about that.
Let me ask you, do you happen to recall what was driving that requirement from DuPont? Do you remember? Have any idea?
I don't really, because I remember the facility, and typically the reason you want a flat floor is so that you have high bay racking.
Yes.
And I don't remember this job having anything to do with that, but at that point, I just don't remember why they required it. It was just they required
it.
Yeah, Lockwood Green was the engineers on it. I do remember that. And and then from there, they went out the next week to a mobile chemical job on the south side, and I think the first slab out the chute was over 100 there. And at that time, what makes it significant is which you don't really use a laser screed doing a super flat floor, at least we never did. So, but you got to think that at that time, you're doing this by hand, and you don't have the equipment today that that we used back then.
So you are still working at the age of 84, and you look great, by the way. The audience can't see you like I am. We're sitting across the table, and you look perfectly fit. Do you still have a goal, a professional goal, Cecil?
I do. I've got a goal that I've been working on for a number of years, and I'm hoping that I can achieve it before I end my life. But I've always had a kinship with concrete contractors because that's what I am. And I've always found us to be our own worst enemy in a lot of different ways. And so I'm about done putting together a presentation that shows errors that concrete contractors commit every day, no matter how large the contractor, even general contractors. And I can say that because in my consulting business, I've worked with some of the largest general contractors. I've worked with Baker Concrete, the largest concrete contractor, and they all commit the same errors.
Yes.
And these errors potentially can cost them thousands of dollars. And what's so interesting about it, to correct these mistakes cost them nothing. Not a dime. They already have the personnel on site working so they don't have to bring anybody in to do this one task or not do this or do that. It's just discipline.
And so your goal, it sounded like, and when we had our lunch together, you also, along with that, I think it sounded like it was actually a goal that we at the association have, and that is to enlarge our community, enlarge our influence. We've been delighted to have our first concrete contractor as a member, Kevin Cox, AM Concrete. Kevin joined us a little over a year ago. We've got Rob Weilacher, principal of Oozin and Case, that we're excited to have. And as you and I talked at lunch, we talked about what's possible if we can engage more of the constituents, if you will, the stakeholders in these big projects and be together. And you talked about earlier about how people just make assumptions. And there's so many serious preventable errors that don't necessarily require expenditure, a big financial expenditure. It's a discipline. And in this case, what you and I talked about over lunch was just the discipline of relationship and community building and getting together and saying, here's what we struggle with. What do you struggle with? And because there's, as you well know, there's so many things that have to come together for a great placement for it to be very, very good. It's more than the concrete guy doing his part real well. It's everybody in concert. So is that also part of this goal of yours as well, would you say?
Well, it is, but that particular goal, I've kind of moved it to the side. I've kind of went as far as I can go with that.
Yes.
And I really don't have the platform or the opportunity to move it any further, because that requires other people.
Yes.
This other goal
you can
I'm producing
that,
and I can present that.
Well, I can't wait to see that, Cecil, and I don't know what it will look like, how we can help you advance that, we the association, because I feel like we really are. There's so much change happening. There's a lot of changes with blended cements and pozzolans, and it just seems to me now more than ever that collaboration and coordination throughout the concrete construction community is it's essential. And what you're creating will be something, I think, that we can find a way to help you achieve that goal of helping the people that you've been a part of for so many years, help them and see them avoid some of the errors that can happen. And so I'm excited to hear about that. Last question. I know you've been involved with ACI, and to a lesser degree GRMCA, but certainly ACI. What would you say are the benefits for the construction community engaging with ACI and GRMCA, of course, but in these associations? As you think about that, why does it make sense to be involved in these associations?
Because if you join the ACI, it will cost you little money, and the dividends, what you get back, it's just unlimited. You form an association with like-minded people that are in different parts of the industry that goes back to this, let's get together and let's see what we can do together, instead of, that's your fault, not my fault.
Yes.
No, it's your fault. Not you get away from all of that. You hear everybody's problems, and what's so interesting is that the commonality. We're all there for the same purpose, and that's bettering the industry that we work in. And so you've got classes, you've got documents, you have information, sources of information. You make contact with people. If you go to the national convention, you get an opportunity to work and talk with other contractors that you actually can form a relationship with, because they don't feel like, well, you're my competition, I'm not going to talk to you. And that's the way that I formed my relationship with Angelo Colosani, with
Right.
Terry Fricks in Texas. I mean, if you can have these associations and you didn't actually get active in the business, in the ACI, you can actually join committees, and you can be a part of changing things and clarifying things. It's endless what you can get out of that association.
Well, one thing for me, that I learned today is my desire to engage you in the GRMCA. Your colleagues with Wayne Wilson, who's very active in our technical committee, Lee Thrasher, and many others. You know these men. You've spent your life working with them, and I think we've got a common mission. And so going forward, I intend to lean on you and include you. And we've talked at lunch about we've been doing these low carbon concrete forums. We did one at Skanska, one at Brassfield, very, very helpful. And now we're looking at in September a finisher forum, and that we're planning to do and that would be a great opportunity for you to be involved in that, so that we, again, not attack anyone or not be critical, but let's come together and share what we know, what's going on with the Portland limestone cement. What are people, what are the opportunities there, and the other pozzolans. It's, again, as I said earlier, I see that the need for what you described in the working together, and it's never been greater than it is today, and I think it's only going to be more so. And so I'd love to have you to engage with us. And but again, I really thank you. I've called you last week and on short notice, and we set this thing up, and it's so good to see you. I haven't seen you in probably over 10 years. I think when I was at Vulcan, we communicated about a little project. The details escape me at the moment, but we've spoken, but we haven't seen each other. And so it's been great to be with you. And I meant what I said earlier in my opening remarks, Cecil. As it relates to my concrete, my understanding of concrete, you were profoundly influential back when I was in great pain, suffering in the aftermath of that project, and determined not to experience that again. And I'm so glad. I don't remember who it was that said call Cecil, but I'm glad they told me, and I'm glad we got together, and I'm just grateful to you, my friend. I'm grateful.
Thank you. All I can say is I really deeply appreciate it, and thank you very much. And I've enjoyed it, and I would like to participate.
Good. Thanks again.